Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Young. I'm the pastor of Calvary Chapel, West Grove. It is my great pleasure to welcome everyone here tonight for our debate between creation and evolution. We're very excited for the debate tonight because it gives all of us the opportunity to just look at the facts. Just look at the facts of science, and then all of us will have the opportunity to decide for ourselves which belief system is best supported by the scientific evidence. And that's why we're so thankful for Bill and for Phil to be here to make this night possible for all of us. A couple of announcements they wanted me to make before we start. First of all, they would like to have an idea of how many people would be willing to stay for a little while afterwards for some pizza and some time of talking and sharing over in the fellowship hall. Raise your hand because they need to kind of get a count. Just hold your hand up high for just a minute so they can get a count because they still haven't ordered the pizza yet.
$1 slice.
I wonder how many hands there would be if it had been steak and lobster. That's what I thought. Okay, that gives us a pretty good idea. The other announcement is next month, our Creation Evolution session on the first Saturday of April, which is the 4th, will be on the topic of dinosaurs. And it's a very popular topic. It's something that a lot of people are interested in. Where did the dinosaurs fit in history and all of that? So that is next month. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the evening over to our moderator. So let us welcome Joel Emilio.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is going to be a debate about the scientific evidence that supports creation or evolution. And I want to take the time to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Bill Morgan. He's a design engineer at the Naval Weapons Station in Seal Beach. Since Bill became a Christian, he has researched the creation versus evolution debate, and he has spoken at various venues across the country on the subject for about 18 years. Phillip Summerfeld is our other speaker, and he's attending Golden West College. He has been actively researching this debate for about 3 years now. He grew up in the church and considered himself a Christian until he was about 21, at which time he considered himself an agnostic. Since the age of 23, his research has led him to consider himself an atheist since he doesn't believe in a creator at this time. So this is the way it's going to work. Bill is going to be the first person to begin, and he is going to demonstrate scientific evidence that we see that leads us to believe that there was a creator of life in the universe. Phil is then going to follow Bill, and he's going to demonstrate two premises. He's going to demonstrate that science can't test for a creator, and that evolution as a biological theory is no longer considered a hypothesis, but a full-fledged scientific theory. All right, now there are a couple of ground rules that I want to make here. While this is a debate, please remember that this is just a friendly exchange of ideas. Everybody who's come here has had their own perspective on this debate, and everybody has an opinion about what happened. It's easy to want to cheer for somebody that you agree with, but we ask that you not cheer, clap, or make noise until after the speaker is done. There's going to be an opportunity for interaction. At some point in time, we're going to have a question and answer session. You've been given blue cards and yellow cards. If you have a question for Bill at some point, fill out the blue card. If you have a question for Phil, fill out the yellow card. These cards are going to be handed to me at some point during time. It's going to be after, it's going to follow the rebuttal, the introductions and the rebuttal. So we're going to have Brand that's going to collect the cards, and he's going to provide them to me. I'm going to do my best to get everybody's question in, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to do that. I think the most important thing is just to make sure that you articulate your questions as clearly as possible so that I'll be able to read them and convey what you wanted to ask the speakers. I might filter out some questions that might be similar at the same time. And I'm going to do my best. A lot of times during debates, we get a lot of questions slighted towards one speaker. I'm going to do my best to make sure that both of them have equal time to speak. So the way that the debate is going to work is that we're going to have introductions. Bill is going to go first. He's going to have 20 minutes. Phil is then going to follow him. He's going to have 20 minutes as well. When there are about 5 minutes left for either one of them, we're going to have somebody hold up a sign that says 5 minutes. They're going to get 1 minute signals and then a time signal. After that, there's going to be a rebuttal. Bill is going to go first, and he's going to talk about the issues that Phil raised. That's going to be 10 minutes long. Phil is then going to have a chance to rebut Bill. That'll be 10 minutes as well. After that point in time, after our rebuttal, you're going to have the opportunity to pass your cards over to the very center of the aisle. Brand is going to come and pick them up and direct them to me. After that point in time, we're going to have what I call direct questions. Bill gets to ask Phil a question, and Phil has about 2 minutes to respond to Bill's question. And then Bill is going to be able to have a rebuttal to that original question. And then Phil is going to be able to direct a question to Bill. Bill has 2 minutes to respond, and then Phil is going to have a 1-minute rebuttal. All right? After that point in time, we're going to have our questions and answer session. And then we're going to have a closing statement by both of them that's going to take about 5 minutes. And after that time, we're going to have pizza. So with that said, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Bill.
Well, thank you, Joel. Thank you for coming. It's a privilege to be here. I met Phil twice this week. Very intelligent man, very nice man, and it'll be a cordial debate, I'm sure. Well, let's start with my life story. I was raised in Buffalo, New York. I'm a Bills fan, so have pity. But I was raised going to church every Sunday. Went to church every Sunday, went to Sunday schools, Christian camps. But at the age of 14, I was taught this. My biology teacher taught me this as if it were an absolute fact. He taught me that man had ape-like ancestors, and as a 14-year-old, this puzzled me. I said, this is contradictory to the Bible. Which one do I believe? Well, I trusted my biology teacher. I accepted it, and kind of liked the idea too, because at that time of my life, there were some things going on in my life where I didn't like the rules in the Bible. And so I sat there and I looked at this and I said, wait, if the Bible is wrong about science on page 1, the Bible must also be wrong about all those rules. And as a 14-year-old, I said, I can work with this, and that's what I believed for many years of my life. For 12 years, I considered myself an atheist. And I am a skinny guy, I know that, but I did work construction. Once I had an entire construction crew that were all born-again Christians. They witnessed to me all summer long. They were my buddies. We went on trips and played softball together. But I tell them, I know that helped you, I respect your beliefs, but I'm an engineering major. I don't believe in any of that. I didn't listen to them. At the age of 26, I got a little comic book that talked about the detailed evidence of the ape-man fossils. They actually told me what the fossils were. When I was in 9th grade, my teacher just showed me the cartoons. Never showed me what the fossils were. Never told me there were alternate interpretations of it. So at 26, I had a question. I just wanted to know what's true? My agenda was really truth. I want to know, do people have ape-like ancestors or do we not? So I studied it, and I've been studying it for about 20 years, and I am convinced that the only ancestors in your family tree are human, okay? But no matter what you believe tonight, I like to encourage people to not believe me, but to listen to me, compare it to your current beliefs, and then you decide what to believe. I'm all about people hearing both sides and deciding for themselves. Okay, so 2 things I believe to be true. I believe the universe is the result of design. I believe photosynthesis is designed, lizards are designed, you're designed. I see a lot of design everywhere. And I believe the theory of evolution is not true. Those are the main points I'm going to make today. Real quickly, what is an atheist? Someone who says they do not believe in any deity. What is an evolutionist? Someone who does believe that they have apes in their family tree. Quite often they're passionate about it and they'll defend that. Just because someone believes in the theory of evolution, does that mean they're an atheist? Absolutely not. So I don't know all of Phil's beliefs, but I do not believe in the theory of evolution, and I do believe in a creator-designer. I'll let him articulate his beliefs, but I'm not calling anyone an atheist if they believe the theory of evolution is true. Okay, the most important part of science is observation. The heart and soul of science is observation. If you have a scientific belief, what should it be backed up with? Observation. There are steps to science. Science begins with an idea. You get paid more money if you call it a hypothesis, okay? Then you test your idea. Suppose I had an idea and I told you pens could fly. What would you request? Evidence. I'm an engineer. Why don't you believe me? Are you religious or something? Doesn't matter the person's credentials, you should always ask for the evidence. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, a million, a billion, a trillion times the pen falls. Suppose I say, truly, believe me, pens could fly, based on my authority. Should you? No, because you didn't what? You didn't see the evidence. Your conclusions should be based upon observations, not upon your ideas. I've talked to many, many evolutionists. I believe they have an idea and a conclusion lacking evidence. Suppose I were to tell you that you have ape-like ancestors. What should you politely ask for? Evidence. I never asked for the evidence. I saw cartoon drawings in 9th grade, and that's what caused me to believe it. Here is evidence that you are not related to an ape. You've got apes in a cage at a zoo. You pay $55 to look at the ape. Nothing on earth gets a half-price discount because they're dragging their knuckles and they're a close relative, right? You are either in the cage or paying the $55. If the theory of evolution is true, why is there not one living animal alive today to support it? You're either 100% ape or 100% human. Evolutionists believe birds have lizard-like reptiles. Now, I've seen 1 million birds in my life, and so have you. I've seen hundreds of lizards. I've never seen a blizzard. Have you? Think of the details. The details are avoided by evolutionists. For a lizard to become a bird, those front legs have to become what? Wings. I'm not the greatest design engineer. My boss is here. He'll attest to that. But I cannot even comprehend how a leg could become a wing. But supposedly, by chance, it did. Can you imagine the details? For millions of years, you've got an animal with a leg becoming a wing. It can't run, it can't fly, it can't catch food, it can't get away from anything. The scales are becoming feathers, the solid bones are becoming hollow. Where are these animals? I believe they're only in imagination. They're not in living evidence or the fossil record. And so the conclusion should be based upon the evidence, not what you want it to be, okay? So, important science question for tonight. How did the universe originate? This is a good question of science. The first law of thermodynamics states matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. The universe is full of energy, full of matter. How did it originate? This law of science, I'll translate it for you, says it did not poof here from nothing by natural means. Matter and energy does not poof from nothing. It's a very important question, and I think a devastating question to an atheist worldview. Now, the universe is not eternal because of the second law of thermodynamics, so we've got a finite universe that did not have a natural beginning. I feel the best explanation is a supernatural beginning, and that's a law of science. Science question number 2, how did life originate? Very, very important question of science. There's another law of science called the law of biogenesis that states life only comes from life. Another law of science. I've never met most of you before. Let me guess, your parents were human. Your dog came from living dogs. The fleas on your dog came from living fleas. This is confirmed every single day, trillions of times, by observational science. How did it begin? Well, it didn't begin by natural means, so that falsifies that. The best explanation would be supernatural. Translation, this law of science clearly tells us life does not arise by natural processes. Okay. What do the biology books teach? Well, first, they got a beautiful line on the cover, an exact quote from a current biology book. Life arose from non-living matter on the early Earth. Now, is that a scientific statement? It is not, because it's not supported by, right, it's a hypothesis, but they state it like it's a fact, and that's what I heard in 9th grade. The cell theory, universally accepted, all cells come from pre-existing cells. The atheist worldview is somehow matter and energy mixed together and made the first living cell. And they would say it's contradicted, except for that first cell. The cell theory is true. The difference between creation and evolution, it's important to learn what people believe that disagree with you. Now, this is the evolutionary tree of life. All of this stuff is alive today. This is a timeline. I'd like to touch on some details on this. Let's learn the details on the history of the gorilla. You go back in the history of the gorilla, and there's a zebra line that joins with it. They're teaching you that zebras and gorillas share a common ancestor. Is this animal alive today? Is there one fossil to support that? It's not supported by observation. Evolutionists believe gorillas and mushrooms share a common ancestor, and it's right there. No laughing, this is science, everybody. Is that organism alive today? No, it's not supported by observational evidence. If you're an evolutionist, you believe gorillas and pine trees share a common ancestor. And if you're an evolutionist, you believe all life has single-cell bacterial ancestors. So, very important point. If you think the theory of evolution is true, you think you have what? Bacterial ancestors. Forget about the apes. You think you have bacterial ancestors. If you think that creation is true, you think bacteria can only make what? Bacteria. And people come from... Now, which one of these two beliefs is supported by observational science? The creation belief. Every birth on the planet supports creation. What's this? Bacteria on the sharp end of a needle. Now, if you're an evolutionist, you think these are your relatives. And I'm not saying that flippantly. That could be Grandpa Joe. That could be Aunt Emily. And 100 of your relatives could sunbathe on the sharp end of a needle. Do you really believe that? Or do you want to believe that? I think it takes much more faith to believe that is your relative than to believe that was designed as bacteria, it came from bacteria, and will only make bacteria. If you are an evolutionist and wash your hands with antibacterial soap, you're killing your family. You should feel guilty about that. Let's look at some important math. Evolution math, bacteria plus mutations plus time equals what? I thought big, blue whales. That's a lot of mutating, okay? Creation believes bacteria plus mutation plus time equals what? Mutated bacteria. I've met a lot of evolutionists and they say, well, bacteria gets mutated. This is what I say. It is still bacteria. It's mutated bacteria. It doesn't get lungs, arms, legs, brains, stomach, spleens, kidneys. It's nothing but mutated bacteria. Okay? Mutations are a fact of life. How would you answer this question? Do you believe in evolution? This is an important point. Would you say yes, no, or what do you mean when you say evolution? This is vital for people to know, because the word evolution means different things to different people. The word evolution means change. Do you believe in change? Yeah, within limits, a lot of things can change, right? People are changing, they're getting taller, right? They're still people. You could have 20 kids. I love my kids, but you'd be crazy to have 20. They could be taller, shorter, smarter, dumber, better looking, less good looking, faster runners, slower runners. But they're all what? People. Variation is a fact. You can call it microevolution. Yeah, there's a lot of variety of people, a lot of variety of dogs. But people make what? People, and dogs make dogs. Natural selection is also vital for everyone to understand. Suppose you owned two dogs, a furry dog and a hairless dog. You take them to Alaska in the summertime. You come home and your family member says, "Where's the dogs?" "Oh, I forgot the dogs." So these dogs are stuck in the wild of Alaska. They fall in love, get married, and make puppies. What are they going to make? A mixture. Some could be furry, some could be hairless. Winter comes. What's going to happen? Well, the hairless dogs are going to say mucho frio because they're chihuahuas. Then they die. They can't reproduce. The furry dogs can live. They reproduce. What do they make? Mostly furry dogs, but the phenotype, fancy word for physical trait, of a hairless dog could show up. But when the winter comes, adios for him. The only type of dog in Alaska would be furry. If you dumped your dogs in a hot desert, the only type that might survive is what? A hairless dog. My daughter told me the other day, she said, "Dad, now I see why there's Mexican hairless dogs, but there's no Alaskan hairless dogs." And I thank her for her input on that. Science tells us, this isn't complicated, dogs. You can breed them like crazy. The Germans went nuts in the 1800s with dog breeds. They are all still what? dogs. Is natural selection true? Absolutely, 100% true. Many evolutionists are shocked if they learn that creationists believe natural selection is true. Is natural selection evidence that dogs have bacterial ancestors? No. No, very important. Once again, microevolution is true. Little changes, not macro. Dogs only have dog ancestors. Somebody asked you, why do you believe in intelligent design? I'll give a one-word answer. Design. Okay? So, somebody asked me that. This is what I tell them. They said, why do you believe in? Well, I believe in design. What do you mean by design? Everybody look at the back of your hand. You'll see a vein popping out if you're lucky. I'd like to ask an atheist this polite question. How many miles of blood vessels do you think are in the human body? They might say, oh, I don't know. Well, just take a guess. They might say 2 or 3. The answer is 60,000 miles. You have 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. So I politely ask an atheist, what's your best explanation of how we got a piping system of 60,000 miles in our body? Is that the result of intelligent design or chance? The most likely answer I get? Well, nobody knows for sure. I didn't ask you if you knew. I asked you for your best explanation. Okay? That's what I'm asking. I design pipes as part of my job. I did a 16-mile job. It took me about 2 months and a lot of stress. 60,000 miles, I can't even comprehend the design involved in that. How many miles again? 60,000. Enough to circle the earth 2.5 times. That's a lot of piping. What's that? Mount Rushmore. Suppose I had a tour group of people from China. They didn't know anything about Mount Rushmore. And I taught them time, nature, and chance made that over billions of years. Would they believe me? No. They wouldn't know who made it, when, why, or how. But they'd have no doubt that what? Somebody smart made it. And that's what we're debating tonight. So I lose my job as a tour guide. I get a job at UC Irvine. What's this? Suppose I taught my freshman anatomy class, this is the result of millions of years of natural processes, time, beneficial mutation, natural selection, made the eye. How long would I keep my job at UC Irvine? Forever. I could be president of the university. The only thing allowed to be taught is everything came by a natural process. They're not even allowed to question it. A design is something that's planned for. That's a definition from a dictionary. Chance is something that is not planned. I hope not to get into word games, but there's some definitions. Suppose you come home, you see this on your driveway, 15 stones in that pattern. Would you think it's by design or by chance? The pattern looks like chance, but you're not certain because you weren't. Suppose you see that on your driveway. Would you guess design or chance? Looks like a design, but you've got faith. Let's say about this much faith because you were not. But I would say you got about 500 miles worth of faith to believe it happened by chance. Both sides have faith. Neither side was there. Suppose you come home, you see that. Do you need faith to believe that happened by chance or by design? Yes, because you were not. Now you got about that much faith. You've got about 600 million miles, I think, to think that happened by chance. Once again, both sides have faith. One side has more faith. The question is, regarding the stones, how complex does it have to get before you would conclude, yeah, that has to be a design? Let's talk about you real quickly. You've got 75 trillion cells. They're all in the right place. You don't have bone cells on your eyeball, hair cells in your spine. Each cell cranks out 100,000 reactions per what? I did the math for you. That's a big number. 75 followed by 17 zeros. Every second of your life, your body cranks out that much chemistry. Question, how complex does a human body have to get before you would conclude that's a design? That's plenty complex for me to admit that has to be designed. Those are little hairs in your ear. Sound travels in waves, they wiggle these little hairs. At the bottom of the hairs is a nerve. The nerve converts the movement to electrons. The electrons go to your brain. Your brain processes the electrons to produce sound. This is only one little detail in your body. That's fantastic design. I don't know how much evidence somebody would need if they were open-minded, okay? And That's my goal. Sometimes people say no real scientists believe in creation. Not true. This guy has a PhD in genetics, one of the world's leading experts in genetics. He teaches at Cornell. He believes in design. He invented the MRI machine. I'm going to go faster here. You got this handout. I would have loved to have seen this in high school. I thought if you loved science, you had to love the theory of evolution. Not true at all. Thousands of PhDs believe creation is true. This is one of my favorite slides. What do these guys have in common? They're all major league ball players, and they've all been operated on by Dr. Louis Yoakum. I blew my knee out playing volleyball. He was my doctor. Very, very nice man. He was teaching me how the knee works. I asked him a question, and he's probably the leading expert on knees in the whole country, because every baseball team sends their players to him. I said, Dr. Yoakum, do you think the knee is the result of design, or do you think it's the result of chance? The leading expert on knees in the country politely smiled and said, that's a design. It's not even an issue to him. He's convinced it. He knows knees. So real quickly, scientific evidence for creation. The first law of thermodynamics, the universe did not appear from nothing. The second law of thermodynamics, the universe is dying, it's finite and decaying. The law of biogenesis, life comes from life. Design, 60,000 miles of blood vessels is enough for me. Genetics, biochemistry, zoology, that means people make people, apes make apes. And real quickly, questions for Phil. How did the universe originate? What's your best explanation? How did life originate? What is your best explanation? Do you really think 60,000 miles of blood vessels is the result of chance or design? And do you think humans have bacterial ancestors? Okay, thank you. Sorry I went over.
Is this working? Yes, sir. Okay. Hello, my name is Phil Summerfeld. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for showing up. Thank you for inviting me here, Bill. Thank you, Pastor Brad, everyone who helped get involved in this. I appreciate it very much. I'd just like to say at the outset that I will try to make this as entertaining, as informational as possible. This is my first debate. It's really my first public speaking appearance ever. So I unfortunately can't be as polished and smooth as Bill, but I will attempt to make it informative. Just a quick background on myself. Like Joel said earlier, I'm 24, I'm a college student, currently majoring in mathematics. I grew up as a Christian, went to church regularly until the age of 10 or 11 roughly, after which we stopped attending church, however, all collectively espoused to believe in God. But it played less and less a part in our lives as we got older, and by the time I was 23, I felt the most apt way to describe myself would be as an atheist, and not just simply, like Bill said, someone without a belief in a higher power. One thing I wanted to point out before I get started is I just wanted to mention that most of the things that Bill talked about don't count as evidence for creationism. Most of what he discussed falls under the two categories. Either he can't believe how it could have occurred naturally, or it's way too complex. Therefore, he, quote, sees design in it. These don't count as arguments for creation for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, you can't test it. There's no way to falsify those claims, because you can't test what a creator would do. As an autonomous figure, he can do whatever he wants. So however he decides to create the universe, the earth, the planets, whatever he decides to do, you can't test for that. That's just something I wanted to point out at the beginning, is that most of the slides he discussed fall under those categories, not evidence for creationism. That's a conclusion he makes because he doesn't buy into the evolutionary theories or hypotheses. Just real quickly about science itself, like I said, the big thing that's lacking in the creationist model is experimentation, falsification. He makes observations. He's very intelligent. He sees all this complexity in the cells and in life in general, and he makes these observations and concludes, without testing anything, without testing to falsify his hypothesis, he concludes that a creator must have been responsible for it. But unfortunately, science, in order to progress, you need to be able to falsify your claim. You need to be able to say this was wrong, therefore we can discard it and converge on the truth. If you leave creation on the table, it can accommodate anything. Creation as a hypothesis is the most accommodating hypothesis you could ever imagine, because the creator could have done it however he wanted to, he or she wanted to. But accommodation is not the same as explanation. And a theory that accommodates everything explains nothing, because you can't distinguish between anything. That's why I believe creation is not science, not because of any personal religious biases, but rather because you can't test it. Science is based upon testing your claims. You cannot test for the creation model. Like I said, he talks about all these things that he believes couldn't have occurred naturally. And those, like I said, just fall under arguments from incredulity. You just can't possibly imagine how they would occur naturally. Well, if there was no alternative theory, I could understand how that's very alluring. If there was no other natural way to explain it, I could understand why everyone would want to believe that a creator did these things. There is an alternative, though, and that is evolution. And evolution is not just a hypothesis. It's a theory that's been tested, attempted to falsify for over 150 years, and it has not been falsified. And is that because, scientists are atheists or are they anti-religion? It's not because of any of those reasons. It's because that's where the evidence has led to. Evolution is not a conspiracy. There's just so much evidence to support it. He himself claims, he agrees that microevolution is a fact. And he claims that from microevolution, you cannot get to macroevolution. Macroevolution distinguishing, speciation, evolution above and beyond the species level. He claims that that does not occur. However, he fails to actually advance any theory or any hypothesis to explain why there is a barrier there. He doesn't assert any barrier. He just washes it away and says there is no macroevolution. But microevolution, being no barrier afterwards, can turn into macroevolution, taking into account environmental factors. There's all kinds of documentation of species diverting because of geographical occurrences, and over time, they become a different species. That's macroevolution. We witness that. And that's not something that we have to interpret from the fossil record, although we do see that. We actually see those things happening in real time. Do we see, as he said, a lizard turning into a bird? No, because that's just ridiculous. No evolutionist claims that. That's not what evolution says. Evolution does not say that birds or lizards turn into birds just overnight, not in our lifetime. These are gradual changes that have took roughly, I think last estimate, or last figure I read was that the earliest life forms were supposed to have occurred around 3.8 billion years ago. So this isn't a lifetime occurrence. This is not something that any of us is going to witness. I'll just go through some of the evidences for evolution. Actually, I'd like to talk about complexity first, because that's a big feature in his opening statement. He argues that because things are so complex and very finely detailed, that indicates design to him. I actually argue that complexity is not necessarily an indication of design. I argue that complexity in a lot of cases in terms of human ordeals is an indication of design. We see electronics around us, they are very complex. We can logically conclude their design. But there's one big key feature that we're missing. We've seen these electrons be produced by human hands. We know we can go to the factory. You can't go to the factory where God creates things. That's one key difference, and I know that that's kind of oversimplifying, but it is a big, big deal. So complexity in my opinion, doesn't necessarily indicate design. And I'd like to actually share an example. It's not, full proof of what I'm trying to say, but I think it's fairly poignant. I actually just read this example a few days ago. If you were walking out in the middle of nowhere and you came upon a pile of stones, and they're all irregularly shaped, and they're all different sizes and different colors, and they're all formed from different minerals, and then in the middle of that pile you found a brick, just a plain red brick. If you were to actually try to describe the brick and the stones, you could describe the brick by using 3 measurements: length, width, and height. The stones, you would have to have a much more complex, detailed description of it. You couldn't describe it just by 3 measurements. There's much more that goes into describing an irregularly shaped stone. Now, I think everyone in here would agree that the stone is more than likely the one that was designed. Whereas the brick was the one more than likely designed, whereas the stones more than likely arose from natural processes. And so, like I said, that's not exactly proof that complexity doesn't indicate design. All I'm saying is that complexity doesn't inherently imply design. And I think that's an example that most of us can reach. One more thing about complexity. Supposedly, super intelligent creator created all of this, and all this complexity is due to his workings. I find that a little odd, considering that in terms of engineering, usually the goal is simplicity. The goal when you're trying to achieve an objective with whatever tools or resources you're using is simplicity. If you can't solve a problem in a simplistic manner, that's when you assert the complexity. That's when you insert the complexity. So in terms of complexity being a design goal, the only design that we know of, human design, speaks otherwise. And I don't understand why you can assert that just because it's complex, it obviously indicates design. When in our own species, we are always striving for simplicity. If there was a computer that could function as well as the computers that we have today, that was 10 times more simple, we would all be buying those. We don't, because we can't. Complexity, all the electronics that go into computers are there because we can't figure out how to achieve the results without using all that complexity, without all the extra spare parts, and all these types of things. So in terms of complexity indicating design, I think that's not necessarily true, and I think that's actually, again, falls under the argument that it's so complex it must have been a designer. But again, there's an alternative description, and that description is held up for 150 years, and that is evolution. And I'll just go through a couple of pieces of evidence to support evolution. I'm sure a lot of you have heard a lot of these things I'm going to state, but they are important. And I think if you actually go and do the research like Bill encouraged, don't listen to us. Go out and do the research for yourself. I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I'm not a biologist by any means. I have a very rudimentary understanding of biology and evolution. So I'm not, don't come to me for your answers. Don't come to a debate for your answers. Debates are about entertainment. Go and do the research for yourself. Go online, read the books. I listed 4 websites, I think, 4 or 5 websites that you can go to, and you can find all kinds of evidence to support evolution. And all you have to do is just take the paper home, and you can just search for yourself, and there's thousands more out there. So I'll just run through a couple things. One of the pieces of evidence that evolution is the most likely explanation for how we arose is that all organisms share a fundamental unity in terms of their, in terms of mechanisms of replication, heritability, catalysis, and metabolism. That says a lot because, granted, yes, a creator could have designed it, but again, that's accommodation, that's not explanation. We're looking for a natural way to explain things. That's what science is. So if you're looking to explain something, a creator, it's almost useless in terms of explanation. Vestigial organs, rudimentary eye holes, wings that are useless for flight. These are all vestigial organs that show that these transitions are occurring. The organism that has these rudimentary body parts has used them for other, it's called co-option. When an organ is passed on to you and you don't use it for its original intended purpose, or it's not complete for its intended purpose, you co-opt it for another use, and it becomes part of your regular existence. That's how organs have functioned for many, many times. Another thing is it's called an atavism, something that reoccurs in a particular species that did not occur in its direct immediate ancestor, but did occur in its ancestor much further down the line. These things become dormant in their immediate ancestors and reappear in the species that we now know. And these only occur consistent with the evolutionary pathways that we hypothesize. So they're not random. They only occur within the direct line of descent. Fossil evidence is one of the main things that people always talk about. I know a lot of people like to say there's no transitional fossils. Again, go do your research. You'll find transitional fossils from all kinds of species throughout the line. And transitional doesn't mean that it's the immediate ancestor and immediate descendant of a particular species. It just means it shows a mosaic of features and it fits in the right place and time where we believe that transition to have occurred. DNA evidence, again, these are very basic ones that everyone always talks about. Similar organisms, morphologically speaking, have much closer DNA than organisms that don't appear to be similar. It didn't come out very right, but I think you guys get the point. One thing I'd like to talk about, and will take a minute or two to explain. I think it's very, very powerful, though, if I can get it across. It's called ERVs, or endogenous retroviruses. These are viruses that actually reverse transcribe their RNA into DNA, and this DNA is integrated into the genome of its host cell. And if this host cell passes on this DNA with the retrovirus in a sperm cell or an egg cell, it passes from generation to generation, becoming endogenous within that species, meaning it's always there from birth. Now, these endogenous retroviruses have been used, or could be used potentially, as a way to track lineages. If, for instance, apes or the precursor to mammals had an ERV that was inserted, we'll call that ERV1, and they continue on, and that branch splits. There's a branch that goes off, and that's maybe perhaps the precursor to mice and rats, and we'll call that and then endogenous retrovirus is inserted into that lineage, ERV2, and the other lineage, perhaps great apes, ERV3 is inserted there. You can see the pattern is if we have the ERVs that are only located upon our branch, but we have, as you go closer and closer down the line, we become more and more similar, or we have the same ERVs that the mice and rats would, this will be evidence that we do share a common descent. And scientists are actually, as they continuously map more and more genomes, they're finding this out. These are following their predictions. They're not just accommodating the evidence afterwards. They learned about these ERVs, and now as they're starting to map more and more genomes, they are seeing that the evidence does fit. The evidence supports their claims. Again, this would be an attempt to falsify evolution. By the way, if someone falsified evolution as a scientist, they would be extremely popular. Their career would skyrocket. That's, not that everyone hates evolution, or not scientists don't hate evolution, but finding something new, finding something that discredits a particular theory is one of the most amazing things a scientist could do. So they're not in conspiracy. They're not trying to cover up anything. This is what the evidence genuinely tells us. And in general, evolution doesn't hinge upon one line of evidence. There's so many lines of evidence from geology, paleontology, microbiology, DNA evidence. All of these things converge on the same general truth. They're all consistent, and they are all consistent with other non-biological theories that we share. They're all consistent with geology. So these aren't, again, they're internally consistent and consistent with other forms of science. Real quick, he talked about the first and second law of thermodynamics, arguing that those completely disprove a natural origin of the universe. First law of thermodynamics, like he says, energy and matter cannot come from anything. Just as a side note, not necessarily true. If you study up on quantum mechanics, there is a lot of evidence to support that matter and energy do spontaneously originate. Not terribly relevant, but I'm a physics nerd, so it's kind of interesting to me. However, he talks about how that falsifies the Big Bang. The Big Bang does not claim that matter and energy came from everything. The Big Bang describes the expansion of what we believe to be an infinitely small point in space prior to our current time. So it doesn't say that matter and energy came from nothing. I know that's a very common argument. It's thrown around a lot, but it's just based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what Big Bang science says. Second law of thermodynamics, he talks about how it shows that the universe cannot be eternal. And he says it falsifies the Big Bang theory because entropy should be increasing. I don't think he explicitly said that, but I know that's what a common statement is made, that entropy should be increasing. Well, first off, second law of thermodynamics says that entropy either remains constant or increases. It does not say strictly increasing. But entropy is based on two things, the amount of heat and the volume of the given substance. So at the beginning of the Big Bang theory, the universe was, if not infinitesimally small, extremely small. And all of this heat was in this one spot. So the volume was essentially zero. So there was essentially, not exactly, but essentially, you get the point, zero entropy. As the volume has expanded, the entropy has just gone up because the volume has expanded. And that's what entropy really states, is that entropy increases, and it does increase. We witness that all over the place. Now, within the confines of the universe, small areas can decrease if there are mechanisms to allow for that to occur, as long as they're offset by the additional increase in entropy in other areas. So those two laws are no problem for any scientist, even creationist or evolutionist, because like I said, there are many scientists who are creationists. Also, quick note, he talked about how there's thousands of scientists who are creationists. There was a study done, I want to say, if you're really interested, I have the citation, I can tell you later. I think it was in 1997, they did, or not a study, they did a survey, and they limited it to relevant fields of evolutionary biology. And there was 480,000 scientists in America alone that they asked if they were creationists or evolutionists. Only 700 of them, and this isn't evolution, this is fields pertaining to evolution, only 700 of them claim themselves as creationists. That's less than 0.15%. So if you want to bring up numbers, first off, I don't think numbers are terribly relevant because I'm sure Bill would agree it's what the evidence dictates, not necessarily what people think. But if you want to bring up numbers, creationists are farly outnumbered. And that, again, that's in America alone. Other countries are much further on the other side. Other countries are probably less than 0.10%. So, saying that there's, even if, I grant you, even if there are 1,000 or 2,000 people, there's still upwards of 500,000 who would disagree with that. In terms of numbers alone, that doesn't speak very highly to the creationist model. I think that's about it, all I have. And actually, yeah, I think that's about it. Are we asking each other questions now, or are we waiting for later?
Rebuttal.
Okay, so I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Phil made a lot of points. He says that no evidence was presented. We have two laws of science. And if the first law of thermodynamics has been falsified, Phil, I'd be very happy to hear about that, and that would win a Nobel Prize. I've studied it, I understand it pretty well. It has not been falsified. Second law of thermodynamics has not been falsified. The universe is increasing in entropy, going downhill. The law of biogenesis has not been falsified. Now, you can say that doesn't falsify the theory of evolution, but that doesn't make it true. Those are laws of science that have not been falsified. Now, you said you cannot test for the theory of evolution. Well, people often say, well, creationists don't make any testable predictions. Well, I would disagree. This man made predictions. Francisco Redi, he predicted life only comes from life, which is a life-saving thing. People used to believe that rags plus wheat could equal mice. Meat plus air equals maggots, okay? He did an experiment, won't spend much time on it. He put a cheesecloth on meat and showed that the flies are not coming out of the meat. It's flies laying, or the maggots weren't coming from the meat. The flies were laying eggs on the cheesecloth. You follow me? A predictable, life-saving thing on how to preserve our food. Who knows who that is? Louis Pasteur, a fantastic man of science, fantastic creationist. He predicted life could only come from life. Many things he invented, including pasteurization. If you kill all the little bad guys in milk, you're not going to get any more if you isolate it. Another creationist making fine predictions. Okay. Now, if there is so much evidence for the theory of evolution, I think it would be a good time to present it. Which fossils are you talking about? People could say, oh, there's many, many fossils. Where are they? Speciation was brought up. I have a slide on it. The founder effect. Real quickly on speciation. Suppose you had 100,000 snails. You build a 405 throughway through them. They can no longer reproduce. After a few generations, they may no longer interbreed. You follow me? Because of different morphology, they might start to have different scents, or they might have mutations where they can't do it. Well, the evolutionists would say speciation. The creationists would say, no, they are still what? They are still snails that has lost genetic information. That's an example of extinction, not the theory of evolution. It's an example of the loss of information. Okay, so he talked about time. He goes, well, you don't expect to see it. This takes millions and millions of years, and I have to break out the secret weapon of evolution. I knew it would come up. The magic wand of time. What is your evidence for bacteria being the ancestors to a blue whale? Oh, wait. This takes billions and billions of years. The magic wand of time is broken out. For example, frog plus princess plus kiss equals prince. Well, that's a fairy tale. But frog plus millions and millions of years equals prince. That's the theory of evolution. I don't believe that. I believe frogs make frogs. And prince came from humans, okay? That's my belief on that. Okay. Fossils. Let's really look at the fossils. Often evolutionists say fossilization is rare. Is it? There's trillions of fossils out there. There should be billions of fossils to support the theory of evolution. Okay. Now, I made this color-coded. Okay. Single-celled organisms are supposedly the ancestor to invertebrates. There are billions of fossils of single-cell organisms. There are billions of fossils of invertebrates. Here it says transitional forms. 0. Okay? Billions of fossils of invertebrates, supposedly they're the ancestors to vertebrates. The transitional forms? None. Why is that? Someone might say fossilization is rare. I would conclude they never existed. Once again, there should be billions of living organisms to support the theory of evolution. There should be billions of fossils. Where are they? I would change my mind too if I saw the evidence, but I don't see the evidence for that. Okay, he said engineering is all about simplicity. Well, I am an engineer. It's about functionality. My boss is here tonight. I said, hey, I designed it. It's really simple. What does he care about? Does it work? The human body works. 75 trillion cells cranking out 100,000 chemical reactions per second. That's functionality. That's engineering. Okay? 11 body systems working together. That's engineering. That's functionality too. Okay? Quotes from evolutionists on fossils. In no single documented case is it possible to trace a transition species by species from one genus to another. Many other quotes like that. We can go on and on. They admit amongst themselves the lack of fossil evidence. Okay, he directed you to websites, that's fine, but I think evidence should be presented here for our cases. He brought up a common claim. There's certain bats that live in dark caves and they lose their eyesight. Evolutionists say, see, that's evolution. Once again, no, that's extinction. That's loss of a function. The evolutionist has to show not how they lost their eyesight. The evolutionist has to show what? How they got their eyesight. You follow me? If you live in a dark cave and your offspring are blind, it doesn't matter. They could pass that gene on. If they need it, they'll go extinct. The blind ones won't survive. Once again, that's natural selection. How did they get their eyesight? And how did a bat get sonar? Sonar and echolocation, that's another good question right there. Okay, let's talk about DNA. Very, very good point. Very common point. People say, hey, all living things have DNA. They say that's good evidence for the theory of evolution. And then they'll say we have more in common with an ape than bacteria. All of these organisms are made up of cells. These are the ones that reproduce by meiosis. So now bacteria is less common than the others. These are all vertebrates. So the list is getting more narrow. These have 4 limbs. These give birth to live young. And humans are the only ones who do open heart surgery and drive-by shootings. My point, do humans have more in common with apes than they do bacteria?
Yes.
Would you predict that our DNA would be more common to an ape than bacteria?
Yes.
I would. DNA makes proteins. Proteins are the machines that keep you alive. I would predict the same thing. But are the differences close enough to assume we're related? That's what you have to decide. The evidence says we are more common with the chimp than bacteria. I would say you would expect that. Think. You eat bananas. Monkeys eat bananas. You need proteins to digest bananas. You have hair. Monkeys have hair. That requires proteins as well. But still, very important. Modern science in biochemistry says the difference is now up to 5% as they trace the chimp genome. But suppose we are 5% different than an ape. Your DNA is like a word that's got 3.2 billion letters to it. That's a long word. That's the genome, okay? 3.2 billion base pairs. What's 5% of 3.2 billion? 160 million. You are not 1 or 2 mutations away from an A. That's a tremendous difference. Yes, you are more similar, but the differences are still overwhelming. He talked about retroviruses. I have a slide on that. A retrovirus is like this. They look at the human genome. They look at similar parts of a chimp genome and say, hey, the same mutation is in the same place. That's good data. There's 2 possible conclusions. Many evolutionists would say, hey, that means we're related to each other. Well, there's biochemists who said no. There are insertion points on the genome where we could both acquire this virus. You follow me? The fact is, there's the mutation or the retrovirus at the same spot. 2 different possibilities. To me, it doesn't show ancestry, common ancestry at all. And she's a PhD in molecular genetics. Once again, he talked about matter and energy being produced from nothing. I'd love to hear that. I would be very interested in that. And I never once said the Big Bang. I talked about the origin of matter and energy. I know this happens all the time. I ask someone, how did the universe originate? They might say the Big Bang. No, I didn't ask you how you think matter and energy expanded. I asked you what? How it originated. So I never did say that. And often people say, hey, in a local system, entropy can increase. Well, my system is the whole universe, and universally, entropy is increasing, the universe is going downhill, and so the question is, how did all that good energy get here in the first place? An atheist won't answer that, but good, available energy is running out universe-wide. How did the ball get to the top of the hill? It can't get there by natural processes. Thank you.
I'm going to be cheating a little bit on this one. I do have a book in front of me, as you can tell. Just to cover a couple of things, because again, I'm not a biology major, and there's a lot to memorize in biology, so even if you were, I don't know if you would know all of this. But he talks about there are no fossils between invertebrates and vertebrates. This is one of the books, actually, on the sheets that they handed out. I thought we were going to do book references, but I guess we didn't. But if anyone is interested, again, this is called the Counter-Creationism Handbook. Basically, it just has about 450 arguments, and then it just goes through and has citations for all the answers that it gives. So, fossils between vertebrates and vertebrates. Picaya, an early invertebrate chordate. Uninosum, an early chordate. These are very difficult to pronounce, I apologize. Hycoella, chordate similar to Uninosum. Cathiamurus diadexus, the oldest known chordate, 535 million years old. I'm not even going to try those last 2. So there was 6, and this is just, again, a brief reference, and they give citations if you want, you can look up more. So the claim that there's no fossils between invertebrates and vertebrates, I don't know. Bill's a nice guy. I don't think he's lying. I just think that for whatever reason he's missed it, or he's been given bad information. He also talks about, a snail, if 2 snails were, he mentioned the 405 reference, and he said if 2 snails, were separated by a freeway, didn't mention 405, I apologize, they would still be snails. Well, that's because of our classification system. When 2 species separate, they separate at the lowest point. So we still classify them as snails just because of our classification system. But they are still, it is still a form of evolution. It is still something we witness all the time. Because we don't classify them as new species, because they branch at the lowest part, that doesn't provide evidence for creation. I know that's, again, a common claim that dogs produce dogs, blah, 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 blah. Well, if they branch at the lowest part, of course they're still dogs by default. And he talks about, why don't we see this really fast, transition? Why don't we see it? I'm waving a magic wand. If we saw that instant type of creation or the instant type of transformation, that would actually be evidence against evolution. Evolution does not predict that. It predicts the exact opposite, gradual changes. So if we saw that, that would actually falsify evolution. I don't know how that's evidence against evolution that we don't see something that falsifies evolution. He also talks about how the human body, it works, so it's irrelevant if it's simple or not. My point wasn't that engineers always make simple things regardless of how they function. My point was that functionality, if it's the same, an engineer would choose the simple choice every time. I don't see how anyone disagrees with that. If they function exactly the same and you can do the exact same things with them, people would choose the simple choice every time. Because that's how we try to achieve goals. We try to achieve a function, like Bill said, it's about function. And then we go for efficiency. And I'm not an engineer, so I'm not trying to discredit him, because he obviously knows much more about that than I do. But I think that's just basically what everyone knows to be true. He mentioned the quote about the transitional fossils being lacking. I found that interesting considering it was from 1982. It's now 2009. So I think that if we updated our research, we might see differently. He asked me how did it get here, and he wants me not to give the explanation or the best explanation, but he says, how do I believe it got here? All the energy, referring to the energy. Again, he said that I was claiming the first and second laws were falsified. I was claiming that the Big Bang Theory, because he was talking about origins, and I know in terms of evolution, he includes the Big Bang in evolution. Talking about origins, I was saying that the Big Bang Theory does not contradict those two laws. That's my point, not that those were falsified. My point was that the Big Bang Theory is perfectly reconcilable with those two laws. That was my point. But how did it get here? What my best explanation is, a lot of people like to hinge on string theory because it's the popular thing to do nowadays. I personally don't buy into string theory too much because of the very same reason that I don't buy into creation. It can't be falsified. There's over, I think the last time I read, there was 500,000 different versions of string theory. So if one universe doesn't fit, or if one string theory prediction does not fit our universe, just change the theory. There's, again, over 500,000 different ways you can discuss string theory to make it fit any universe possible. They claim that there will be predictions that are falsifiable in the future. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Large Hadron Collider that went online last year. They claim that will be able to test string theory. I'm a little skeptical, perhaps because I don't know enough about string theory, but my best theory, or my best guess as to how all this energy got here was that it was eternal. And I know Bill says that the universe can't be eternal. There's an alternate theory to string theory that's not as popular, but I think it at least is more tenable. It's called loop quantum gravity. And there was an issue of, I think, Scientific American that ran a few months back discussing loop quantum gravity, that it predicted an oscillating universe, a universe that actually goes through cycles. And this last expansion is just the latest in all the cycles. Now, is that testable? They claim there's some testable hypotheses or predictions that can be made off of it. Again, I'm not terribly sure, but you asked for my best explanation. I'm attempting to give it. I know that's probably not very satisfying to most people, but the question of where the universe came from is a very good question. It's a very good scientific question that should be explored using scientific methods, not invoking the name of a creator, because that stops all of our investigation. If we just say, God did it, we can't figure it out, therefore God must have done it, what do we do now? How do we test it? So the question is a great question, something that I look into all the time. Not that I'm answering the question, but I'm curious as to what answers people are coming up with. I just don't think that because we don't have the answer yet, that counts as evidence for creation. There's a lot of things that we've been silent about over the years that we just naturally evoke the hand of God, or excuse me, a creator, because we didn't know the answers. And time after time after time, those get overturned. Time after time, they get overturned. We finally come up with an explanation, and then the God of the gaps, as it's so called, that gap shrinks. God has to go somewhere else. Okay, well, we can't explain this phenomenon, so that's where the creator comes in. Because we can't explain something is not evidence for a creator. It just means we have more work to do. That's pretty much all I have for the rebuttal.
we want to kind of take a break for a second and collect the cards that you have. So if you had any questions that you wanted to bring, we're going to work through those while they ask and answer questions.
Okay, this is the time I get to ask Phil a question, and then he gets to ask me one. Let's see what number that is. 2 minutes. Okay. Phil talked a lot about falsifiability and testability. Well, my question is in an area of science that's easily testable, falsifiable, and it has to do with the origin of life. We already saw the slide. Life arose from non-living matter on the early Earth. It's a statement, not even a question. Another biology textbook. What was the origin of life? We'll never know for sure, of course, how life on Earth began. But science seeks natural causes for natural phenomena, and that is the approach that must guide scientific inquiry about the origin of life. And I am getting to a question. Okay, the goals of schools should be to educate and teach truth. I think everybody would agree with that. The law of biogenesis teaches that life only comes from life. Yet schools only teach that life began from non-life, okay, which is an anti-scientific belief. Here's my question, and Joel, I request that he gets time, if you need time to look up. Absolutely, take up as much as you want. My question is, do you feel it's proper for schools to teach ideas that contradict laws of science? That's my question. And you can take your time to research if you want.
The question was, do I think it's proper for schools to teach information that is contrary to scientific laws?
Yes.
Short answer, no. I know the implication of the question that, like he points out, biogenesis, the laws of biogenesis, but no, I don't think that science classroom should be teaching well-known falsified information. Since I have another minute or so, it talks about abiogenesis, and Pasteur proved life only comes from life. Actually, what Pasteur, and this, again, out of the book, this isn't my own information, the spontaneous generation that Pasteur and others disproved was the idea that life forms such as mice, maggots, and bacteria can appear fully formed. They disproved the form of creationism, which would be instant creation, full, very complex life. There is no law of biogenesis that saying very primitive life cannot form from increasingly complex molecules. And very primitive forms of life are just organisms that can self-replicate. Biogenesis says nothing about that. That's pretty much it.
Joel, I get to rebut, right?
Yes.
Well, let me get my little thing out here. Well, I would disagree. I believe, I'm a simple guy, life comes from life, no matter what type of life you're talking about. That's what law of biogenesis talks about, life only coming from life. And as a quick rebuttal, just suppose the first life did happen by chance. A bunch of chemicals and energy mixed together, and you've got a living organism, which would be an absolute miracle, and it's falsified by laws of science. Not only does that thing have to be alive, what two things does it have to be able to do? It has to be able to reproduce, which is incredibly complex chemistry, and it has to be able to metabolize. You guys call it eating. Plants call it photosynthesis. By chance, a bunch of chemicals has to become living, be able to reproduce, has to be able to metabolize, and then it has to be able to mutate and survive, or else all us pizza eaters wouldn't be here today. Okay? Lots of miracles if you believe in the theory of evolution. Okay? You can question.
Can I, 10 seconds on the last thing? Last question you asked me?
It's up to the moderator. Sure.
Joel?
Sorry.
10 seconds on the question you asked me, or just move on to the question?
I think we have some time.
Okay. Talked about it being incredibly complex. I have the citation. Self-replication has been witnessed to occur in DNA strands that are as simple as 6 nucleotides. I know that's, probably doesn't mean much to anyone, but 6 nucleotides compared to the whole genome is extremely small. My question for you, and I'm trying to look for a specific answer, because you mentioned a couple of predictions that creationism does make. Creationism doesn't really make those predictions. That's that's more out of what we observe. The creation model, because you're not identifying the creator, you're not identifying any of his characteristics, you're not identifying whether or not he's even intelligent or not, doesn't make those predictions. So I'm asking you, what specific prediction would a creation model make that could be falsified?
Okay, great. Hope I'm not repeating myself. Many predictions could be falsified by a non-theistic belief. Produce life from non-life. Produce matter and energy from nothing. You made the point that fast transitions is not what we're looking for. I'm just looking for something that's left behind, right? Where is the remnant of the transition between a reptile and a bird, between an ape man and a human? Where are the ancestors for the fleas, etc.? Dinosaurs absolutely 100% exist. They are 100% what? Dinosaurs in the fossil record. So what would falsify my beliefs is a half a leg, half a wing, half a scale, half a feather, half a solid bone, half a hollow bone. The respiratory system of the reptile evolving into a bird. Some evidence of these transformations would be fine, but all we see is the final product. If you remember my chart, my tree of life chart. Oh, I'm going to real quick. I think I got 2 minutes to answer this. Oh, well, forget about it. The top part are all parallel lines. Do you remember? All the branches were deep and buried in the distant past. That chart, the last 100 million years, they're parallel lines. That's creation. Creation believes in parallel lines. Turtles making turtles, hamsters making hamsters, etc. Every birth on the planet supports creation. Suppose reptiles are the ancestors to birds. Okay? The egg hatches. Ma and Pa look. Dad says, Ma, them front legs, they don't look right. They're becoming wings, let's suppose. What would they do? They would kill it. In nature, they kill their mutants. They don't sit back and say, well, it's evolving into a bird. I'd like just to see the evidence of the transitional forms. Once again, trillions of evidences every day for creation. Reptiles make reptiles, birds make birds. So I think that would falsify it. Some living evidence, some falsified, some living evidence, some fossil evidence, make life from non-life, make matter and energy from nothing, would be good evidence for that. Thank you.
Real quick, that actually wouldn't falsify anything, because again, as I stated before, creation, a creator can do whatever he wants. Unless you invoke a creator of a particular book, in this case I know it happens to be the Bible, that's a different question. But if we're just talking about a creator or a creationist model, there's nothing you can falsify. The things you brought up, though, have, again, I encourage the audience, and Bill yourself, I encourage you to go look those things up. These transitional fossils that you claim are lacking are there. Just go to Google, type in transitional fossils, you'll see lists of them. And, there's all the things you mentioned, but again, you can do all the research yourself. I literally did this research. I've been doing it, but I put a lot of this together in the last few days because it's not hard to find this information. That's it.
John, you got one more. Can I do a quick remote because he got 10?
Yes.
Okay. Real quickly, I strongly encourage all of you to look for the detailed evidence. Now, we all see magazine articles, newspaper articles. I encourage you to read the articles with a highlighter and highlight what part of the article. The evidence part. A few years ago, LA Times said a new ancestor to man found in northeast China. He was big, he was strong, he was hairy. He lived in the trees. He was found by John Smith of Harvard. The last paragraph of the article on page A8 or something said, what was found? 1 inch of a shin bone. Okay? So why wasn't that the first sentence in the article? LA Times headlines, 1 inch of a shin bone was found in northeast China. We think it belonged to a man who was hairy, strong, lived in the trees. Once again, believe anything you want. But I would be happy to look at the evidence of all those fossils that neither you or I can pronounce to actually see what the actual fossils are. And there's interpretations of data. And I enjoy reading what the actual fossils are when they make these claims. And that's what you should too. But the first sentence of any paragraph should be the evidence, not the interpretation of the evidence, like that 1 inch of a shin bone. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get to some of the questions that you all have raised. We have been inundated, and there's no way we can get to all of them within 20 minutes. I'm going to rely on my timekeeper to let me know when we're close to the 20-minute mark. So what we're going to do is we're going to take turns. There have been questions that have been raised for Bill, and then there are some that have been raised for Phil as well. So the first question is directed to Bill. Does attributing creation to a creator stop us from testing?
Could you repeat that?
Yes. Does attributing creation to a creator, I think what the individual is asking is, if we attribute something to a creator, does that stop us from testing and going through the scientific method?
Absolutely not. I believe the scientific cultures that progressed believed in creators, that there was order to life, that there was orders to crop cycles, orders to the solar system, etc. So, of course, many of the great scientists, and I would question the 0.15%. Louis Yoakum, I consider him a man of science who repairs the knees. I would say most people do believe there's a creator. Statistics can tell lies. I think most people in the world of science do believe in that. I believe that there's predictions, there's order to the universe. We saw how we are benefited by predictions that life only comes from non-life. If life could come from non-life and you open a can of Campbell's soup, you could have an eyeball winking at you. You could have all kinds of life. But pasteurization taught that if you kill living organisms and secure it, they're not going to come back to life. So absolutely not. I love science. One reason I was an evolutionist is I truly thought this creationists were a threat to something that I loved. How many people would agree with that? I had only been told, oh, those are wackos, they're anti-science. So when I was an atheist, I said, well, I don't like creationists then because they're picking on something that I love. I love science. It's my field, it's my degree, it's one of my great passions, and I don't believe it falsifies existence. At 75 trillion cells, 60,000 miles of blood vessels is a design at all. And you get to rebut.
The question was, does attributing anything to a creator stop testing? It doesn't stop testing in the sense that you don't continue investigating, but it doesn't add anything to your research. And if anything, you can never disprove it, because again, a creator could, there's a lot of theistic evolutionists, a creator could have used evolution to guide the progress of life. I know Bill doesn't adhere to that. All I'm saying is that a creator can do whatever he wants, so you can't falsify it. It doesn't add anything. The fact that a creator could have potentially done this doesn't add anything. It doesn't give you anything to test. He claims that you can test, you can open a can of,
Campbell's soup.
Campbell's soup, thank you. You can open a can of Campbell's soup and you know that you won't see an eye. Well, again, that's not what evolution claims. To say otherwise is just misleading. I think that's about it.
All right, the next question is for Phil. The question is it true that ERUs kill the host and make something different? ERBs, excuse me.
I'm not familiar with that. Again, I'm not a biology major, so a lot of this is new information to me. But I'm reading this information and I'm looking at the citations. ERBs killing the host. ERBs killing the host. I've not heard that. I've done, significant amount of research on ERBs. I've never once seen that mentioned at all. The only outside mention of ERBs regarding creationism, I've heard intelligent design advocates like to latch onto ERBs, claiming that they predicted them, saying that this is how God would have done it, or excuse me, they never say God. An intelligent designer, this is how an intelligent designer would have done it. And then they fail to elaborate on it as to why. So I've never heard that claim. I can't really respond to it because I'm just not familiar with it. I apologize.
For the first time, we agree. Now, I've researched ERVs too, mainly because of this debate. And I talked to a PhD in genetics, is actually John Sanford, that guy. We talked about ERVs. Once again, it's where a virus would attach to a genome, and it's traceable. I don't believe that means common ancestry. Dr. John Sanford said, if anything, it's de-evolution because it's a downward trend on the genome. It's not an increase of information. But by no means does it kill the host, because we've all got them in here today. Every one of us has them in our genome. So it does not kill the host.
The next question is for Bill. The question is, are there any scientific falsifications of evolution?
Anybody think I answered that 3 times? Honestly, Joel, do you think? Of evolution?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, you can go back to my stone example. Did I say you can absolutely prove that it was the result of a design? No. I said it's the best explanation that requires the less faith. I wasn't there, Phil wasn't there, nobody was there at the beginning. You cannot completely falsify it. But here's an example that might benefit you. Suppose sounds like a North Florida storm. Suppose we're walking through Central America and I push a bush aside and I find a piping system, and this piping system has 60,000 miles of pipe. It's got a pump the size of your fist, and this pump can last 120 years. There's not one leak in this piping system. I go back to my university that's funding me, and I said, I found this fantastic piping system. It's amazing. I wonder who made it. Suppose my people who fund me said, no, 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 no. We have to come up with an explanation that's natural for this piping system. And I said, but why? It's 60,000 miles. It's got a pump. It doesn't leak. It's got the right fluid in it. They say, no, we have to find a natural explanation. Can I prove that it wasn't the result of design? Can I absolutely 100% prove to these people? No, you cannot 100% prove that creation is true. But by laws of thermodynamics, laws of biogenesis, what we see in design, the lack of transitional forms, the faith required to believe in the Creator is very, very small. The faith to believe matter and energy came from nothing. All of a sudden you got this energy and it filled the universe with a Big Bang. The Big Bang made stars. The explosions of the stars made the Earth, etc. I believe that takes much more faith. But I don't want to go too much because that's my closing statement.
The question was is evolution...
Are there any scientific falsifications of evolution?
Okay, now I don't know if that's supposed to be potential scientific falsifications of evolution, or if the question was, are there in existence known observations of falsifications? Potential falsifications, true chimeras, animals like Bill talked about who are half and half, that would falsify evolution. A mechanism that would prevent mutations from accumulating, that would falsify evolution. To my knowledge, no mechanism has ever been proposed by any creationist or intelligent design advocate, to my knowledge. And then Bill talks about this, mentions this often, matter and energy, just spontaneously generated and, appearing in your Campbell soup cup. That would falsify evolution. So there are very simple ways. There's many, many, many more. Seeing a fossil that's dated, that should be above another fossil in the geological column, and they're actually reversed. And there's no other way to explain it. You can't explain it through uplifting or erosion or just human tampering. Those would be genuinely easy ways to falsify evolution if it were not true.
All right, the next question is for Phil as well. Did the first living cell have DNA?
I don't mean to dodge the question. First living cell. If you're talking cell in the terms that we speak of it, then yes, it would by definition, because a cell contains DNA. This, in all honesty, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but like I said, I'm not a biology major. That would be a question whoever asked the question, I encourage you to look up. I know that the precursor to DNA is speculated to be RNA, and beyond that, I'm not really sure what because this is a lot of speculation. Discussing the origins of life and abiogenesis is speculation. There's a lot of good work being made. There's a lot of hypotheses that have been made. I looked up abiogenesis, found a website with I think 20 different ways in which abiogenesis is supposed to have occurred. So, did the first simple cell have DNA? I would say yes, because by the definition of cell, it would have DNA. Beyond that, I don't know what else to say. I apologize.
Once again, we agree. I would feel based upon inductive logic that everything alive today has DNA, so I would assume the first living organisms had DNA as well. But he brought up an interesting point. He said he found 20 different theories on how life began. People say how life began. Well, there's many, many different theories, but they only leave the one out that agrees with the law of biogenesis. I've seen these articles that say it came from pyrite, from the edge of a pond, from outer space that life began, but they never leave the one that agrees with the natural law of science. But talking about the first life, there's something I like to talk about. People talk about what are the odds of the first life happening by chance. Let's talk about one protein. A protein is a tiny component of a single cell organism, okay? It's a tiny little part of it. Let's see if a protein can happen by chance. Imagine an alphabet with 20 letters. Okay, there's your letters. There's 20 of them, too. You can count them. Too late. Imagine a word that's 400 letters long. What are the odds that you could guess my secret word? You got 20 letters to pick from. I got a word 400 letters long. Okay? The odds are 20 times 20 times 20 times 20, 400 times. That, if you know logarithms, most of us don't, is 10 to the 520th power. That's for one word. Now, proteins are amino acids. I will real quick. You've got 20 different amino acids to choose from. The average protein in you is 400 amino acids long. So, I know time is short. The odds of one protein in your body happening by chance is 10 to the 520th power to 1. That's a big number. How big is the number? If you got a stack of papers, you could go to the moon and back 500 times. One sheet of paper is 1 to the 520th power. And that's only one protein. That's not even life, ladies and gentlemen. That's not DNA. It's not a cell membrane. Or, actually, this one is, I should have changed it. The odds you'd win the California lottery 500 times in a row for one protein to happen by chance. And once again, that's not even close to life. So statistics shows that life could not have happened by chance. Okay, thank you. How much is that?
Actually, we have two questions, one for Phil and one for Bill, and they were very similar, so I would like to try to combine these together. The first question for Bill is that is there any evidence from an evolutionist that would cause you to become an evolutionist, and if so, what would convince you? And then likewise to Phil, what type of evidence would it take for you to stop believing in evolution?
Okay, and I would be an evolutionist in a heartbeat. I have no agenda to be a Christian. I would save a lot of time, I would save money, etc. I would pursue other things, okay? So I don't have an agenda where this is my crutch. Once real quickly I was on a radio show and this guy said, "You've got to believe in creation because you're a Christian." I said, "Sir, you've never met me before. I first became a creationist and then I started reading the Bible to try to find out who it was." So what would falsify it for me? Seeing someone getting into the zoo for half price, a half man, half ape, half bird, half lizard. Tremendous amounts of evidence for that. Life popping up from non-life. Some kind of explanation for how an eye could happen by chance, an ear, a tongue, 60,000 miles of blood vessels. So there's many, many avenues that would cause me to falsify and give up my creation belief. But I just haven't seen it. I would give it up in a heartbeat. But my faith is not based upon pleasing mommy and daddy. It's based upon what I see to be as the truth of creation. And if you're a Christian here today, you've got to develop your own faith. And I think it's good to develop it on creation, not just to please other people.
Joel, do you want me to respond to that? Or just
yes, the second question is what would cause you to abandon evolution?
What would cause me to stop believing in evolution would, again, be some of the ways I talked about, some of the ways he's talked about, some of the things he proposes evolution predicts, eyes popping out of nowhere. These things would make me stop believing in evolution. A great way for me to become a creationist was if I actually, I don't mean to get too religious, but if I actually, the Creator actually spoke to me. I'm not going to go any further because I know it's not supposed to be about that. But in terms of what would stop, keep me from believing in evolution, all of these things that we've talked about that he claims, evolution predicts, we don't witness. And if we did witness them, then I would stop believing in evolution. A great thing, if we did not have enough time for evolution to act, if the Earth was 6,000 years old, I would not be an evolutionist. If it was not 4.6 billion years old, roughly, I would not be an evolutionist.
The next question is for Bill. The question is, how can you expect to see a transitional form if all of the organisms living today are modern? And the questioner makes the statement, because they are modern, they wouldn't be in the process of evolving, especially within a time frame that you cannot really see.
Okay. Well, I try not to read into what this person is saying, but he is saying, well, we don't expect to see any transitional forms. And if I misread or misinterpreted that, Joel, would you correct me?
I think you're stating it correct.
Okay, could you read it again real quick? I just don't want to misstate the person.
Okay. The question is, how can you expect to see a transitional form if all of the organisms living today are modern? If they are modern, they wouldn't be in the process of evolving, especially within a time frame that you cannot live to see.
Okay. Well, first, I learn more from people like Phil who disagree with me than people who agree. You should always be cordial when you talk to people. I would talk to this person and politely and respectfully say, are you admitting there's no transitional forms? To me, that's what the question is saying. He says, well, we don't expect to see any transitional forms. So I could politely say, well, then why do you believe in the theory of evolution? It sounds to me, it's like because he likes the hypothesis and not based upon observation. You follow me? As I understand this question to be, he's admitting we don't expect to see transitional forms. Then what is your basis for belief in believing that humans have bacterial ancestors if you admit yourself you're not basing it upon observation? And again, I hope I'm not misquoting him, but I think that's what he's saying, that we don't expect to see the evidence. And I agree with him, we do not see the evidence.
I didn't take the question that way. I took it, perhaps, written a little vaguely. I took it as talking about modern times, not witnessing these transitions, not witnessing drastic changes in morphologies of specific species or organisms. That's how I took the question. I agree with the general premise that there's just not enough time in any individual's lifetime to witness the vast changes that Bill is proposing. So I don't see the question proposed as you answered it. That's pretty much all I have to say.
All right. This is going to be our last question, and it's for Phil. I'm going to see if I can try to explain this the right way. Has an evolutionary increase in genetic information, such as in DNA, ever been observed?
I apologize for this. I know that there's many examples that they cite inside the book. So I'm just going to read a couple of those. Increased genetic variety in a population, increased genetic material, novel genetically regulated abilities. And then they go on to say a mechanism that is likely to be particularly common for adding information is gene duplication, in which a long stretch of DNA is copied, followed by point mutations that change one or both of the copies. Genetic sequencing has revealed several instances in which this is likely the origin of some proteins. For example, when they have 1, 2, 3 4 examples. There's other statements. I'll give you a couple examples. 2 enzymes in the histidine biosynthesis pathway that are barrel-shaped, structural and sequence evidence suggests were formed via gene duplication and fusion of 2 half-barrel ancestors. And then I'll just give one more. Yeast was put in a medium with very little sugar. After 450 generations, hexose transport genes had duplicated several times, and some of the duplicated versions had mutated further. So while that may not make a lot of sense to some of you, it doesn't make much sense to me. These are proposed instances in which information has been added. And again, I really encourage anyone who has questions, don't come to me. You can just grab my book and just read the citations, because every single answer they give is cited. There's all these websites, and these are from 2000, 2001, so these are recent occurrences. These aren't, outdated material. That's it.
And well, quickly, let's talk about mutations. You have more mutations in your genome than your parents had. Your parents had more mutations than their grandparents. You're going back in time, you're getting fewer and fewer mutations. To me, that's a problem for the atheist. You're getting a cleaner genome in the past. To me, I believe the designer created people with a clean genome, and mutations have entered into our life and is rearranging our DNA. So I think that would be a problem. Supposedly time makes things better. No, time makes things worse. You get a billion-year-old universe, things are going to be dead and decayed because of mutation, and that's not me. That's from John Sanford, Dr. Sanford, the geneticist. Real quickly on mutations. Mutation is the scrambling of an existing word. You've got 4 nucleic acids to make DNA. The longest word I could come up with 4 letters is Mississippi. If you randomly start arranging those words, which is a mutation, eventually you don't recognize it anymore. You lose information. So the problem for the evolutionist is to go from bacteria to blue whale. I was talking to John Sanford again. He said it's much more likely, but still impossible, for a blue whale to mutate into a bacteria. You follow me? That the blue whale is losing genetic information, that it's just statistically impossible for bacteria to become a blue whale. Real quickly, adaptation has to do with it. Sometimes people say, hey, animals are adapting. I believe this, and this has to do with genetic entropy, the DNA. For example, I went north with that young lady to Fresno, and it was freezing cold. They had a horse. The horse had hair 1.5 inches long. And I said, whoa, that's pretty cool. I called a biochemist buddy. I said, what goes on here? And do animals adapt? Absolutely, yes, animals adapt. You have enzymes in your body. Horse has enzymes in its body. You stick a horse in a cold environment, enzymes are triggered to grow longer hair. If we took this horse and put him in the equator, what would happen? It would have short hair. I'm from Buffalo. I froze every October and November. I'm tough in February and March, and it means that your body gets used to it. That's not evolution. That's not an increase in information. It's pre-existing enzymes in your body for you to adapt to your environment. And to me, that's information, that's design, and that's greatness, and that's real engineering too. But every animal has it. Fine.
Okay, we're at
It's my
closing.
family.
We're at closing statements.
Okay, closing statements. Well, first I'd like to say it was an honor to be here, and I consider you a friend. I had 2 meals with him, In-N-Out Burger, can't beat that. Very, very nice guy. Pleasure to meet you, and thank John for putting it all together. Okay, age-old question. What is it? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? How many people think it was a chicken? How many think it was an egg? You're both wrong. 2 chickens. Don't you know anything about sex? You need a male and a female. Let's look at the 2 worldviews to answer the chicken and the egg. According to the atheist, first there was nothing, no matter, no energy, and then from nothing we got matter and energy. Violation of the first law of thermodynamics. There was tremendous energy, and it expanded, as we call the Big Bang, to fill the universe with hydrogen and helium gas. Now, I know a little bit about gas laws. If you expand a gas into a vacuum, what's it going to do? Expand to the lower pressure. But the evolutionist believes, no, there were certain clumps where the hydrogen came together because of gravity. Well, if gas compresses because of gravity, it gets hotter and it would expand again. That's Charles' law, but they don't believe that, I guess. It came together because of gravity, and didn't just come together, it formed stars. It had to form stars by their worldview to make fusion, to make heavier elements. Now, fusion cannot make anything heavier than iron. That's physics. But somehow, another star blew up next to it to give it more energy. You can do the research on that. But the stars made heavier elements. That blew up, flew in the universe, and a bunch of them came together and formed our Earth. The Earth got zapped with some energy somehow, and the matter and energy became the first living cell. That first living cell was able to be alive, reproduce, metabolize, and mutate. And it mutated like crazy. If the theory of evolution is true, it became a 2-cell organism. There's nothing like it in the entire universe. It became a 4-cell organism, became a fish, became a reptile, and eventually became a chicken. Wait a minute, there's a sexual reproduction problem. You need males and females. In a G-rated manner, think of the details. You need male reproducing equipment. And we're not talking about worms, we're talking about chickens. You need female reproducing equipment, and they both have to be able to function at the same what? The same time. Suppose the female is fully mutated, but the male isn't. Does she say, hurry up and mutate, dummy, we're dead in a year? You need a functioning male and a functioning female at the same time and at the same place. For the reproductive systems to function, they need a functioning muscular system, a nervous system, an immune system, a skeletal, digestive, nervous, respiratory. You follow me? This takes tremendous faith to think it all happened by chance. But the miracles get bigger and bigger if you're an evolutionist. Food would have to evolve. Water would have to evolve. Oxygen, gravity, atmospheric pressure, the ozone layer, the sun. All of these things would have to happen for the chicken and the egg. I believe in one big miracle, that there's a supernatural, brilliant designer God with the ability to make males and females, put them at the same place at the same time, give them the right food. Does that take faith? Yes. Does it take faith to believe the universe came from nothing? Gas became stars, life came from non-life? Yes. You have to decide what takes more faith. Big conclusion. Why do I believe in a designer? Because of design. Why is the theory of evolution not scientific? Hasn't been observed. And we're talking about bacteria to blue whale evolution. No living evidence, no fossil evidence. Final exam for you guys? It's not too complicated. So, some of the questions I proposed today, didn't hear answers for, not because I don't like you, Phil, but I haven't heard explanations for how the universe originated, how life originated. How in the world did we get 60,000 miles of blood vessels? I emailed a guy who wrote an article on the heart, evolutionist, Carl Zimmer. He's published all over the place. I said, what evolved first? Hearts, veins, or blood? He said, I believe they all appeared in an evolutionary flash. I typed back to him, what is an evolutionary flash? He said, all at once. I said, isn't that creation? Absolutely not. I believe in instant people, instant chickens with the food there, the reproductive, the muscular, the skeletal system functioning, not a step-by-step random process. There once was a man in a small town who was convinced he was dead. Everybody tried to convince him he wasn't. He wouldn't believe it. They paid a lot of money to get a genius to talk to him. The genius came to town, a psychologist, and said, are you dead? He goes, yes, I'm dead. Do dead people bleed? No, dead people don't bleed. So the guy got out his knife and cut him, and he started to bleed. He said, I was wrong, dead people do bleed. Some people are so in love with their hypothesis they will never divorce it. My goal is to meet people who are open-minded to facts and perhaps divorcing their hypotheses. Christians should have the same criteria. Are you willing to look at the evidence, and is it possible to change your mind? I say this with all humility and respect. I'm not picking on anybody. I've met a lot of people that are atheists, and I've had polite talks with them, and they are not atheists because they believe piping systems like your circulatory system happen by chance. These are what I believe. This is just me representing myself. People are atheists. There's a ton of suffering in the world. Everybody in here, you suffered. A lot of people turn their anger towards God. Some people don't like the Bible's rules. Tell you what, I'll tell you a secret about you. Neither do you. Your flesh does not love the rules. Pride. Some people think they're the smartest thing on earth. They don't like the idea of someone supreme. A lot of peer pressure if you're in the world of science and academia to believe it. And sometimes it's as simple as this. It's the only thing they've ever been taught. I was an evolutionist. I didn't like the Bible's rules at the age of 14. There was a lot of peer pressure, and I had never heard different. Why would I believe otherwise? So the question here as I conclude, asking yourself, are you going to believe an idea, or are you going to believe your eyes? Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank Phil also for allowing me to come in here. It has been a lot of fun. A lot easier than I thought it was going to be, but still very difficult. He's a very difficult person to debate with. I'd like to thank Joel, Jonathan for setting us up, Pastor Brad, everyone involved. This has been a really nice experience, in all honesty. I was terrified to come here. Terrified. But thank you for that. Regarding the topic at hand, though, I just want to say there's a lot of questions I can't answer. A lot of questions maybe no one in this room can answer. And I would advise people not to take the lack of answers and use that as solid evidence for their creationist beliefs. If you're talking about science, I really encourage you to search for answers that you can actually test. I know he keeps talking about how you can test the creator. I don't think, maybe people disagree with me, I don't really recall any definitive prediction that he made, except for vague notions about how life will only come from life, and things of that sort. Evolution, I'm assuming most of you here are actually looking for answers, because that's why you came here. Go online. I really encourage you. I'll say this over and over. Go online, do the research, go to the library, pick up a textbook. Textbooks will show you all kinds of pictures of transitional fossils. They won't show you, I know people like to say, oh, they show you, graphically animated pictures. They'll show you the fossils themselves. Do the research yourself. And for the record, I know a lot of people think that if you believe in evolution, that means you cannot be an individual with a faith in higher power. Some people think that's obviously true. There are a lot of people who are able to reconcile evolution with their faith. It doesn't exclude a higher power. God can, the morals that you derive from the Bible, the stories that you relish, you can still hold on to those, even if you feel that evolution is supported by the evidence. If that's your conclusion, if you feel evidence does support evolution, that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. That doesn't mean it at all. That just means that evolution, scientifically speaking, is true. Religion is, I know a lot of people think that creation is science. I argue otherwise, obviously. I think that there's a huge tension between people of faith and people of science. I think they can't reconcile each other. Many people have done it. It's extremely possible. And I encourage you, if you're looking for truth, don't give up on your faith just because you happen to believe in evolution, just because you think the evidence supports it. There's no reason why you can't be bold. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Okay. We have another hand for our speakers.